Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with the latest headlines. The long-awaited plan to pay for the growing cost of social care in England will be set out by the Prime Minister today. There's Tory unease at the expected breaking of Boris Johnson's pre-election pledge not to increase national insurance contributions. Ministers say nobody wants to break manifesto promises.
The social care system has been broken for many years, many decades. Many successive governments have talked about this, have consulted, but never really delivered. This Prime Minister is determined to deliver.
What's your experience of navigating the social care system, and what reforms do you think money needs to be spent on? Get in touch with me today on Twitter at Annita_McVeigh and use the hashtag BBC Your Questions. Ministers say their COVID booster jab plan will help deal with any increase in cases in the autumn. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will set out her government's programme for the next year at Holyrood this afternoon. An urgent call for more foster carers. Barnardo's says the number of children needing a foster family has shot up by 36% in the last year. The actor Michael K. Williams, who starred in the American crime drama The Wire, has been found dead in New York. And also coming up this hour, teenage British tennis sensation Emma Raducanu is through to the quarter-finals of the US Open after defeating Shelby Rogers in straight sets. Hello and welcome to BBC News. The Prime Minister is preparing to announce his long-awaited plans to reform the system of adult social care in England. He says it will fix a broken system in which people face catastrophic costs. He's expected to breach election promises and announce a rise in national insurance of about 1.25%, despite loud criticism from Conservative MPs and peers, as well as from Labour, who say the increase is unfair to working families. Downing Street says 1 in 7 people now pays more than £100,000 for their care and said the system can lead to spiralling costs. Boris Johnson is presenting his plans to the Cabinet this morning before setting out the details in a statement to the Commons later. He'll then join Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid for a press conference later on this afternoon. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
It has plagued previous governments. Plans for reforming social care in England have often come unstuck. But on the very day in 2019 that he became Prime Minister, Boris Johnson made this bold pledge.
We will fix the crisis in social care once and for all with a clear plan we have prepared.
6 months later, during the election campaign, he made another bold pledge.
We can do all these things without raising our income tax, VAT or national insurance contributions. That's our guarantee.
Now it seems he can't keep both promises, so he's on the brink of breaking the pledge not to increase national insurance rates. The Labour leader Keir Starmer says this would be unfair, as it would hit working people hard, including low earners and young people. But perhaps more worryingly for the Prime Minister, many of his own Conservative MPs seem to agree.
I don't want to see national insurance raised for people of all ages. I think many youngsters have paid enough as a result of this pandemic. I think if we want people to be able to retain their homes, then those people should bear the bulk of the cost, perhaps by buying their own insurance policy to insure themselves against a catastrophe of potentially losing all their money on care.
Initially, the extra cash raised isn't expected to be earmarked for social care, but to help clear the backlog in the NHS in England, which has been pummeled by the pandemic, and to increase hospital capacity. So there are concerns that social care could still be left as a poor relation.
We are really hoping that there will be something, not only for the long-term sustainable future for social care, but we do need something immediately now, because most care providers are at breaking point at this moment in time.
And the problem of paying for care predates the pandemic. Boris Johnson says he won't duck tough decisions and he will end the catastrophic costs of care. So ultimately, those costs will be capped. But even some of his own MPs wonder if he'll be able completely to prevent some people having to sell their own homes to pay for a care home. Ian Watson, BBC News.
Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming, who's in Downing Street for us this morning. So, Adam, as the Prime Minister presents his plans to the Cabinet this morning, how much work do you think he has to do to allay concerns, about paying or using national insurance to pay for these reforms?
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a vote in Parliament later this week, which will be kind of like the big bang moment. So I'm sure some work will be put in to reduce the number of Conservative MPs who are worried about these proposals. And then we'll have to just wait and see over the next few months and the next few years actually how these proposals will be implemented, to see at which point you could get some dissent or some opposition, or they could be derailed. But this whole thing about convincing people about the need to do this is the phase the government has moved into now. There was a statement from Downing Street overnight talking about the size of the NHS backlog, and we've seen the Vaccines Minister Nadeem Zahawi out this morning doing interviews talking about the fact there could be 7 million people out there who haven't even come forward for their treatment on the NHS yet, let alone had their treatment delayed as a result of COVID, along with the decades-long wait for changes to how the social care system in England especially actually works.
The social care system has been unfair. If you have assets of £23,350, you really begin to hurt if you, for example, suffer from dementia. 1 in 7 people pay over £100,000 or more for their social care. So it has to, in my view, has to be grasped. That nettle has to be grasped, and this Prime Minister will not shirk that responsibility. And you'll hear from him later today as to how we're going to deal with the broken social care system over the long term.
So speaking of later today then, Adam, how much detail are we actually going to get about the plans as opposed to how those plans are going to be paid for?
Well, we'll find out at about 12:30, because that's when the Prime Minister is going to speak to MPs in House of Commons, and the rest of us will be able to hear it too. Things to look out for: what will be the level of any cap on an individual's lifetime care costs? What will be the level of the means test below which you get state-funded care or state-subsidised care? What will be the increase in national insurance contributions, because that's what we're pretty sure they're going to go for. And also, we're learning this morning there will be a change to who pays national insurance contributions. At the moment, once you reach state pension age, if you're still in work, you do not pay national insurance contributions on your earnings. We're told that overnight a decision has been made to change that, and that will dent that criticism that this is a tax on working age people to pay for things that will overwhelmingly benefit older people. And then, as I said earlier on, just actually what is the mechanism for making all of this stuff happen, both in terms of legislation and in the real world, because that is where we will then be able to predict the potential flashpoints. Because this isn't just the work of a morning and one cabinet meeting and one common statement. This will be the work of many, many years.
And Adam, just away from social care for a moment, the newspaper reporting today that the government is apparently preparing for a possible October lockdown. What are you hearing?
Not very much about this, I have to say, because it looks like from the reports this is some options that are being drawn up by scientists who advise the government, reviving something that was very controversial last year, which was the idea of a sort of mini lockdown-ish thing in October to coincide with the school holidays. The idea that being put forward in the newspaper is that perhaps you'd extend the October school holidays to 2 weeks and maybe reintroduce some restrictions on social contact if there was a situation where cases were getting out of control again. Here's what the Vaccines Minister said about it, and he said very little.
No, I haven't seen any. I know where the question comes from. I think there's the newspaper was reporting that they think there's a possible lockdown. Look, vaccines have given us the ability to reduce infections, to save 100,000 lives. It is through the booster program that I hope, and I'm not going to be arrogant and say to you, this is a sort of done deal. It's all over. It's fine. This virus is no longer in pandemic status. But I hope through the booster program, we can transition the virus from pandemic to endemic status and deal with it, year in, year out. It's going to be with us for many, many years, but not have to close down our economy or take, the severe measures we had to sadly take at the December of last year.
So we know it's almost inevitable that when schools are going back as they are now and restrictions are lifted and life is almost back to normal, that will inevitably lead to an increase in the number of cases. But the theory is, the hope is, and the evidence so far is that the vaccine does not mean that increase in cases leads to a massive increase in pressure on the NHS. But we are moving into uncharted territory, and I'm sure people in various government buildings will be working up various contingency measures to deal with what might happen, although we might never see any of those contingency measures.
OK, Adam, at the beginning of a busy day. Thank you very much. Adam Fleming in Downing Street. Well, let's speak now to Simon Bottery, who is a Senior Fellow in Social Care at the King's Fund. Simon, thank you very much for joining us this morning. If this is going to be fixed once and for all, to quote the Prime Minister, is any money raised going to need to be ring-fenced?
Well, I'm not sure this is going to be fixed once and for all in one go. I think what we're expecting today is a step forward, a good step forward on social care reform, but it's not the giant stride that we would need really to fix social care once and for all. How we fund it, I think that's ultimately a matter for the government to decide, and whether it's ring fenced. Again, I think that's a matter for the government to decide. The advantage of ring fencing is that people will expect to see better social care as a result if they know that their money is going to a specific thing like improving social care.
Yeah, and is there going to need to be a ring fence within the ring fence? Because one of your colleagues at the King's Fund was asking how well would social care do if it came to a scrap between it and the NHS over a fixed pot of money.
Yeah, that's a real concern. We would worry that if there's a fixed amount of money, but it's being distributed between the NHS and social care. Historically, social care hasn't done very well in that arrangement. So yes, I mean, these are the details of it. We would certainly like to see some money, and we think we need to see some money up front for social care, because it's not just about reforming social care with the cap and the changes to the means test. There's a really urgent need for money at the moment to shore up the provider market, to make sure that people can get access to the care they need, to make sure that local authorities can continue and go on providing care, and they're really struggling to do that at the moment.
And is that why you're saying, in reference to your answer a moment ago, that this isn't the giant leap that's needed? Presumably the government will present it as exactly that, as a giant step forward.
Yes, I mean, that would be a concern, that the government thinks that by introducing what we think will be some positive measures, then the job is done, and it really isn't. Social care has been essentially forgotten for something like 20 years. And so if we're going to fix it and develop a system which you and I and people who are listening can rely on in our old age, or if we develop a disability when we're younger, if we're going to have that system, there's going to be a package of things required. We're going to need to look at issues like workforce. At the moment, it's very difficult to recruit enough people into the social care workforce because we don't pay them enough. We're going to have to do something about that. So there's going to be, this is going to be the first step, hopefully, of a longer reform, which gives us a system which we can be genuinely proud of.
Is the plan in place on how to spend the money that's going to be raised? Obviously, raising the money is one part, isn't it? But then you want a plan, a good plan that the money is going to be spent on. Are you convinced that all the stakeholders have been consulted sufficiently to allow the government to come up with a plan?
Yeah, I don't think the issue is the amount of time that they've spent on talking to people and finding out what's required. I think that broadly the issue is, are they actually going to be able to act on what they've heard, so that they can actually so that they can genuinely put in place a programme which does work. The issue is not so much do they know what the problems are. I think they have a good understanding. The issue is, are they able to come up with a plan which starts to tackle those problems effectively?
I just want to ask you quite specifically about caps and floors. We've been hearing a lot about this, and people might be wondering exactly what that means in practice. A little bit of jargon, I guess. Explain that for us.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, at the moment, what's crucial to understand is that social care isn't like the NHS. It's not free at the point of need. If you're hoping to get publicly funded adult social care, you'll have to demonstrate that your needs are high enough, and really they do need to be very high to get care. But you'll also need to have to demonstrate that your assets are quite low. So that's the savings or the value of your home. What an increase in the floor does is it essentially brings more people into publicly funded adult social care. More people will get something from the system. They may not get all of their care paid for free, but they'll have some degree of support. And what a cap does is say, well, if you are paying for it yourself, if you're still paying for it yourself, we'll set a limit on how much you can spend over a lifetime. And once you've hit that limit, that cap, then the government will step in and pick up the costs for you.
OK, Simon, thank you very much for your thoughts on all of this today. Simon Bottery from the King's Fund. And let me just tell you that you can follow coverage of the announcement on social care reform here on BBC News throughout the day. Adam was saying that's expected around about 12:30. Any update on timings, we will, of course, bring that to you. Jane Racker has been in touch on Twitter to say there is virtually no specialist provision for severely disabled young adults. They end up in ordinary care homes without the therapy they need. She says her son is now 200 miles away from her. Robert J. Goffin says it looks very complicated. I think that's something that everybody can agree on. Please do get in touch with your experiences of social care and what you think any money raised should be spent on. How should those reforms work? You can do that on Twitter at Annita_McVeigh and use the hashtag BBC Your Questions. We will try to read out more of your comments throughout the morning. Now, the headlines for you on BBC News so far today. The long-awaited plan to pay for the growing cost of social care in England will be set out by the Prime Minister today. Ministers say their COVID booster jab plan will help deal with any increase in cases in the autumn. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will set out her government's programme for the next year at Holyrood this afternoon. And let's pick up on that last headline, because Scotland's First Minister, as we've just been saying, is going to be setting out her government's plan for the coming year, indeed the coming years, later today. Nicola Sturgeon's statement at Holyrood is likely to focus on pandemic recovery, but she has also made clear her determination to pursue another independence referendum in the near future. Opposition parties will also have a chance to set out their proposals for the year to come, with 2 days of debate scheduled. Let's find out more now with our Scotland political correspondent, David Wallace. Lockhart, morning to you, David. And obviously we're expecting lots of green elements to this announcement today, now that the SNP obviously is in power with the Greens there.
That's right. So this is the programme for government. It's an annual event at Holyrood, roughly the equivalent of the Queen's speech at Westminster. And Nicola Sturgeon last week brought in 2 Green Party ministers to her government as part of a power-sharing agreement. So that probably gives us a hint of the sort of direction she's going to take in the coming year. Economic recovery from COVID will be a big part of today's statement, but she'll talk about doing it in a net zero way, i.e. keeping it environmentally friendly. But we should hear about many other aspects of what she wants to do in the year ahead. More than a dozen bills expected to be announced. We're going to hear more about what's called wraparound childcare, so extending free childcare available to those on lower incomes for before school, after school and during the holidays. When it comes to specific legislation, we're probably today going to hear about setting up a national care service in Scotland. We're also probably going to hear about plans that the SNP and the Greens both want to take forward when it comes to reforming the Gender Recognition Act, so making it easier for someone in Scotland to change their legally recognised gender. And also expecting to hear about a law to pardon striking minors convicted in the 1980s. So a big legislative programme, wide-ranging, and of course we'll hear the detail of all of these headlines this afternoon when Nicola Sturgeon addresses MSPs.
And of course, David, what you haven't mentioned there, because it needs an answer all of its own, doesn't it, is the question of independence. What exactly are we going to hear about that?
So when the pandemic hit last year, Nicola Sturgeon paused planning for a second independence referendum, saying that she wanted to focus entirely on the COVID pandemic. Now, Scotland certainly is not out of that pandemic. We're seeing higher case numbers at the moment than we've really ever seen. Hospital numbers are growing by the day. So I don't think we're in a position where Nicola Sturgeon is going to bring forward concrete plans to MSPs today about the next steps for independence. That being said, both the SNP and the Scottish Greens, the two parties making up the government in Scotland, are agreed that there should be a second independence referendum within the lifetime of this Parliament. Preferably, they both want to have that referendum by 2023. So if that's the case, Nicola Sturgeon probably has to get the ball rolling in some respect in the near future. So it's possible she could outline some sort of plans when it comes to independence. Of course, the UK government, who she wants to agree to an independence referendum, has no plans to back holding one anytime soon. And from opposition parties in Holyrood this afternoon, we'll probably hear quite stern opposition to the idea of independence being discussed while COVID is still a big problem in Scotland and while economic recovery has to take place. That being said, of course, with this power sharing agreement between the SNP and the Scottish Greens, the Scottish Government has quite a healthy majority at Holyrood, so should have no problems getting a green light for its plans for the year ahead.
David, thank you very much for that. David Wallace, Lockhart. There are still conflicting claims about who is in control of Afghanistan's Panjshir province, the last part of the country to fall to the Taliban. The Taliban have repeated their claim that they have defeated the anti-Taliban fighters in the region, the National Resistance Front. But that group's leader has denied this and called for a national uprising against the Taliban. Well, let's find out more now with our South Asia correspondent, Yogita Lamai, who is monitoring the situation from Mumbai. And Yogita, obviously, it's hugely symbolic for whoever controls Panjshir province to actually do that. The Taliban 20 years ago, they failed to control that area, probably the only part of Afghanistan that they didn't. So are we actually any clearer today about who is in charge?
Well, the Taliban claim that they control all of Panjshir province. Yesterday, they did raise their flag in the provincial headquarters of Panjshir. The resistance front says that they are still present in strategic positions and are fighting back. We do know that fighting has continued through last night. And one of the leaders of the resistance yesterday, Ahmad Massoud, in a defiant audio message, had called for an uprising against the Taliban. And today we are seeing a response to that on the streets of some cities in Afghanistan, particularly in Kabul. We're told that there are protests taking place. BBC colleagues who've witnessed them say they saw about 1,000 people on the streets, lots of women among them. We're also hearing report that the Taliban are trying to disperse these protests. What people are chanting during those protests is that we want an independent government. We don't want a government that is a puppet of Pakistan. So while this is an anti-Taliban protest, many in Afghanistan and the resistance front allege that it's Pakistan that's helping the Taliban take over Panjshir. We asked a Pakistani military spokesman about these allegations from the resistance front yesterday that, were they helping the Taliban trying to gain control of Panjshir? They have firmly denied that. They say they don't have anything to do with anything in Afghanistan or with Panjshir. But this is a perception that exists in Afghanistan, and today we are seeing that reflected in the chants at the protests taking place in Kabul.
And obviously because of the terrain in Panjshir, it's possible that those pockets of resistance could hold out for quite some time. But are we hearing any more about possible talks between the National Resistance Front and the Taliban, and any timeline, any clearer timeline about when the Taliban might make clear the shape of its government?
Well, so yesterday the Taliban spokesman said that a government will be announced in a few days. And today we've heard from them saying there are just a few technicalities to get sorted. As far as the issue of talks between the resistance front and the Taliban go, both sides have been saying that they were prepared to negotiate. But I think it's the point of contention between them. We've heard the resistance front and what they want, or what they don't want, rather. And they say we will not accept an Islamic dictatorship in Afghanistan. Afghanistan. And from the Taliban, we know that at the moment they have no plans to hold an election. So the government that will be announced right now will be one that is not elected by the people of Afghanistan. And that is the main point of contention between them. So even if there are offers of talks or a ceasefire from either side, the question is, how can you resolve that issue if there are two very different stands on it?
OK, Yogita, thank you very much for bringing us up to date. Yogita Lamaya in Mumbai for us. And don't forget, you can find out lots more about the situation in Afghanistan on our website. There's full background and analysis and a constantly updated live page where you can follow all the latest developments. Just head to bbc.co.uk/news or download the BBC News app. New figures show that the number of planned job cuts is at its lowest for 7 years, despite the imminent end of the government's furlough scheme later this month. Figures from the Insolvency Service show that British employers planned 12,687 job cuts in August. That's a fall of 11% since July. The data suggests that the predicted surge in unemployment this autumn may be smaller than expected. At the height of the pandemic, firms proposed more than 150,000 job cuts a month. A baby and several young children were among a large group of migrants brought ashore on Monday after trying to cross the English Channel. A steady stream of crossings is believed to have taken place yesterday due to the calm waters and good weather conditions. The number of people crossing this year has now passed 12,000, surpassing last year's total. The Home Office says the total number of arrivals yesterday is still to be confirmed. A public inquiry into controversial plans for the UK's first deep coal mine for 30 years begins later today. The site near Whitehaven on the Cumbrian coast was originally approved by the Communities Secretary Robert Jenrick, but the decision is now being reviewed. Supporters say the mine will create hundreds of jobs, but critics argue opening the mine will harm the government's commitment to cut carbon emissions. The actor Michael K. Williams, best known for starring in drama series The Wire, has been found dead in his New York apartment, aged 54. He played popular character Omar Little across all 5 seasons of The Wire. Reports suggest that he died from a suspected drugs overdose, but this hasn't been officially confirmed. Our North America correspondent David Willis has more.
I need to remind you who I am. Omar, isn't it?
It was the role of a charming vigilante that came to define Michael K. Williams' career. Omar Little, a gay man with a sharp wit and a sawn-off shotgun, arguably the most memorable character in one of the best shows in television history. Hollywood's red carpet a long way from the Brooklyn projects where he grew up. But a talent for dancing paved the way to guest appearances in several hit TV series and, once The Wire had come to an end, to roles in films such as 12 Years a Slave and Matthew Broderick's Wonderful World, in which he plays a man falling into a diabetic coma.
I didn't rush the audition process. I was a little intimidated by Matthew Broderick's name and his reputation, and I kind of prejudged what the situation would be like. And then when I finally read the script, I was like, foaming at the mouth, like, please, I need this project.
Friends and fans alike have taken to social media to pay tribute, among them Lance Reddick, who played Lieutenant Cedric Daniels in The Wire. He called Michael K. Williams one of the kindest, gentlest, most genuine, giving and courageous souls I've ever met, whilst Wendell Pierce, who played Detective Bunk Moreland, hailed him as an immensely talented man with the ability to give voice to the human condition. Edward Norton, who worked with Michael K. Williams on the film Motherless Brooklyn, called the experience one of the greatest privileges of his career. Nominated for 5 Emmys, including 1 in the award show that's due to take place this month, Michael K. Williams never made a secret of his struggle with drugs. Reports suggest his death is being investigated as a possible heroin overdose.
Michael K. Williams, who has died at the age of 54. Now the time is approaching 9:30. It's time for a look at the weather forecast. Here's Sarah Keith-Lucas.
Hello there. Our spell of warm summer-like weather continues through the first week of September. Yesterday we had temperatures up in the high 20s. Today we could see 30 degrees in one or two spots. So very warm almost across the board with lots of sunshine around too. We will keep a little bit more cloud for some central and northern parts of Scotland at times. Perhaps a little bit of fogginess lingering around the east coast of Northern Ireland too. But elsewhere lots of blue sky. Temperatures generally between 22 to 29 degrees. Could be 30 degrees in one or two spots. A little bit breezy for the southwest of England, the Channel Isles too, particularly later on. And overnight we'll start to see some showers working into the southwest of England, some moving into the Western Isles as well. But elsewhere it is clear and dry, but still warm overnight with temperatures generally sitting in the mid-teens. Tomorrow, more of the same, more hot sunshine for many of us, but showers and thunderstorms move into the southwest of England and Wales too, so turning cooler here. Still 30 degrees or so for central and eastern parts, things turning cooler and more unsettled widely by Thursday.
Muria was a hell.
Behind every headline,
I had this feeling that I'm entering a prison.
there is a human story. This is our world.
Put your hands on the car. I just seen the cops kill somebody, and they were treating me as if I was the suspect.
A series of documentary films that reveal the human drama at the heart of global events.
If I'm in jail, I'm living my life meaningfully.
To urge the world to keep focused on what's happening in Hong Kong.
I've got to accept where I'm at and not let it get me down.
Our mind and the unity we have, that's the powerful things in the world.
Our World, this weekend on the BBC News Channel and BBC iPlayer.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with me, Annita McVeigh. A summary of our main stories now. And the long-awaited plan to pay for the growing cost of social care in England will be set out by the Prime Minister today. There's Tory unease at the expected breaking of Boris Johnson's pre-election pledge not to increase national insurance contributions. Ministers say nobody wants to break manifesto promises.
The social care system has been broken for many, many years, many decades. Many successive governments have talked about this, have consulted, but never really delivered. This Prime Minister is determined to deliver.
Ministers say their COVID booster jab plan will help deal with any increase in cases in the autumn. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will set out her government's programme for the next year at Holyrood this afternoon. The actor Michael K. Williams, who starred in the American crime drama The Wire, has been found dead in New York. It's time for sport. Let's get a full roundup from the BBC Sports Centre. Here's Sally. And I know you're starting with Emma Raducanu. I mean, what progress she is making at the US Open. Amazing.
Yeah, it was brilliant to watch. She just a fantastic performance. And as Anita says there, British tennis definitely has a new star on the horizon. Emma Raducanu's remarkable run at the US Open continues as she reaches her first major quarter-final. The 18-year-old beat the home favourite Shelby Rogers easily, winning in straight sets in New York, as Michael Redford reports.
Even Emma Raducanu needed a minute to take it all in. It's a different story for Shelby Rogers. 10 years older than her opponent, she's been here before, and her experience quickly shone through. But while the Brit is just 18, she's playing tennis beyond her years. From 2-love down to 6-2, first set done in just 38 minutes. As the last US woman in the tournament, Rogers was expected to be roared on by the crowd. Instead, they sat silent, shocked and surprised simply in awe.
They've made me feel extremely welcome here, and I'm really grateful. And even to play Shelby, who's an American, and receive that much support and hear my name being chanted in the crowds, I couldn't believe it, and it meant so much. And I'm really, really happy and just super grateful to everyone out there.
Not a single set dropped. Tickets to see the next big tennis star in action are going to be harder and harder to come by. Michael Redford, BBC News.
Europe have retained golf's Solheim Cup after a thrilling final day of singles in Ohio. Leading 9-7 at the start of the day, Europe got the 5 points they needed to secure the trophy. rookie Matilda Castrin with the winning moments as she beat Lizette Salas.
Honestly, it was a team effort. I know I made a great putt on 18, but everyone played so well this week, and we're all just such a good team, and everyone works well together, and our team chemistry and team atmosphere is just amazing. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect coming in as a rookie, but it's just been so much fun, and it's just been an amazing week altogether.
It has been a nightmare start to the rugby season for England's Emily Scarratt, who's undergone surgery on a broken leg. Scarratt was injured just 2 minutes into Loughborough Lightning's Premier 15's defeat by Harlequins on Sunday. The 31-year-old will miss the Red Roses 4 autumn internationals, but will be hoping to be fit for the delayed World Cup next year. England cricket captain Joe Root says he and his teammates need to be more ruthless after losing the 4th test against India. England resumed the final day at the Oval on 77 without loss and with a chance of victory. But after a strong start, they crumbled with the bat. England were bowled out for 210, losing the match by 157 runs. India now lead the 5-match series 2-1, with the final test at Old Trafford starting on Friday. The last of the Paralympics GB team arrived back to the UK last night after a brilliant Tokyo 2020. They won 124 medals, including 41 golds, to finish second in the medal table behind China. 3 of those medals were won by Dame Sarah Story. Morning.
Good morning.
You brought them with you.
I have.
Delighted to see you this morning. I know you're only just home. And now with the medals that you won in Tokyo, you are now officially our greatest Paralympian. How does that feel?
Oh, it feels amazing. A little bit surreal as well. It's going to take some time to sink in, but having been able to chat through with Barney and the kids about how they watched it and what they thought of it as well. And yeah, it's been a whirlwind few days since we got back, but it's so lovely to be home.
Great picture of you all there. And what did Barney and the kids make of it? What was their verdict on your performance?
Well, Louise is very straight. She says, that was good, Mum. That was exactly what you needed to do. And yeah, she's very good at her analysis of things. Charlie was really sweet when I was riding in the time trial because we'd done a lot of racing at some of the motor circuits here in the UK. So he was busy telling Barney that this particular fence looked like the one that they'd been stood behind in Castle Combe just before. That was my final race at Castle Combe, and he was explaining to Barney how the circuit was similar.
So it was meant to be then, maybe?
Maybe, but yeah, we'd sort out the races at the circuits to try and just get a feel for how the tarmac is a little bit different on those motor circuits, different grippy. It feels heavier underneath your wheels. So yeah, we'd been trying to prepare as best we could with as many environments that were going to be similar.
Were you prepared, though, for the environment of the road race?
Well, in some ways, because we train in those sort of conditions occasionally at home.
Rain.
Very different to what we were anticipating. And having done the 32 degrees in the heat chamber and 80% humidity, 3 weeks in Lanzarote, I was ready and prepared for a lot hotter, but 17 degrees on the bike and at times having to ride with my eyes shut.
Oh, no, you didn't, did you?
Yeah, so the rain was coming in so hard, and when you're going downhill and it's quite fast, it feels like it's coming in sideways. So you're kind of squinting through. And yeah, there is a great picture of me riding around one of the corners at the bottom of the racing circuit. I knew where the exit was because of the practice days, but I couldn't open my eyes. It was just hurting too much.
Oh, Sarah, well, listen, after all of that, what do you do now? I mean, I know obviously you're going to take a little bit of time, but what is next?
Well, next year there'll be hopefully a more normal race calendar. I've been abroad twice since the start of the pandemic to race, which is World Championships and Paralympic Games. So I'd love to be able to race a little bit more normally. The UK racing scene has been a little bit on and off as well. So hopefully we'll get through this winter and into the spring and summer months, and we'll have a race calendar that looks a little bit more like it did, in 2019. And then we'll kick on, and hopefully via the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, if there's a race for me there, the Glasgow 2023 event, get our way to Paris.
Staying on the bike. Love it. Inspiration to us all, Dame Sarah Story. Thank you very much indeed. That's all your sport. Anita, back to you now.
Lovely to hear from Sarah Story there. How great to have her on the sofa with you. Sally, thanks so much. Now, a charity is urgently calling for more foster carers after the number of children referred to its fostering services rose by 36% over the last year. Bernardo's says it particularly wants to hear from people who would foster sibling groups. The number of sibling groups referred to the charity over the last year rose by 31%. But a YouGov survey showed that siblings are less likely to be fostered together. Well, joining me now is Brenda Farrell, Head of Fostering at Bernardo's. And I'm also joined by Trishan and Matt, a couple who began fostering in 2020. Good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for your time today. Brenda, I want to begin with you and get you to explain, if you would, why the number of children needing fostering has jumped by 36%, as we've just been explaining, over the past 12 months.
Good morning. Bernardo's monitor the number of referrals we receive from local authorities. And as you say, compared to this time last year, we've seen a 36% increase. Now, we believe that that's related to the pressures associated with the impact of the pandemic. Many families, vulnerable families in our society, experienced a breakdown maybe in some of their support systems. We've seen the increase of domestic violence. We've seen an increase in the need for people requiring support for mental health issues. All of this combined has put some vulnerable families at a state where they are going to need further assistance. At Bernardo's, we've been working with local authorities across the UK to increase the number of foster carers we have available to meet those needs. Some of these incidents will be short-term, so families will need short-term intervention and support. Some may be long-term, and some requiring forever families.
And another impact of the pandemic you're explaining very clearly to us. And by the way, that 36% represents 19,144 children. Just another question to you, Brenda, before I chat to Trishan and Matt. And that is, why are sibling groups so hard to place together? I mean, I guess one of the obvious answers is that potential foster families may not physically have the room in their homes to accommodate sibling groups.
Correct. And obviously that's part of this appeal to raise awareness for that need. And what we want are members of the public who will consider fostering and consider if they have the space. It's so important that we're able to keep brothers and sisters together at such a time of crisis. And we know ourselves through the YouGov report that we recently did, 70% of adults reflected on the positive experience that they had of being part of a sibling group. So it is an urgent requirement that we can recruit enough foster carers who are able to keep those brothers and sisters together.
OK, well, Trishan and Matt, let's bring you in now. I'd love for you to tell our viewers about your fostering experience and what sort of support you've had to be foster parents.
Sure. Good morning. Morning, yeah. I think it's really interesting because it's some of that education that really got us into fostering. So we wanted to start a family and we'd got this kind of traditional view of having a baby and probably adopting. And we went to an adoption event and it was there that we learned about how many older children and sibling groups there are that are in need of a loving home. And we kind of really reflected on our childhoods and on the loving home that we've got here that we can provide. And so we learned a bit more about fostering. And we were hooked from the off and went straight into it. And working with Bernardo's has been fantastic. There's such a brilliant support system. There's so much training to equip you. Because the reality is it's quite a frightening journey to embark upon. And so having that to kind of give you comfort is really important, but just so incredibly rewarding.
And without going into too much detail, obviously, just give us a sense of the children that you've had placed with you and the challenges that they've brought.
Yeah, I think there's so many traumas and experiences within their life that they've dealt with, which are really unfortunate. And I think it's just adapting and trying to provide the right type of care. But through Bernardo's, the amount of support that we get, the training, there's ongoing training, we're able to cope with that and give them positive experiences throughout, like the time that they are with us.
And do you feel that by the time they're leaving your home, that you have made a significant difference to those children?
Yeah, for sure. We do short-term emergency care, so it's kind of around 35 days generally. But in that time, we tend to look after older children and we teach them some really valuable life skills where we can. So Trish spends lots of time cooking with them. We teach them how to do things around the house, etc. And we provide them loads of help with their education. But most of all, we just try and have some fun and do some really nice family activities and just create a loving environment for them. And for sure, I think that makes a real difference to them. They make a real difference to us as well.
Well, that sounds absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure it's so rewarding for them and for you. Brenda, just back to you. I mean, what is your key message to anyone who might be considering becoming a foster carer? And if they have concerns and worries, what sort of support are they going to get from organisations like Bernardo's?
Firstly, it's encouraging people to take that first step to find out more. Bernardo's website will have initial information available, plus the contact details of our local services. It's been able to have those conversations to chat through your personal circumstances and explore if this is the right time for you to foster. Many people will self-exclude because they believe the myths that if you're single, if you are in a same-sex relationship, if you're a divorcee, you're not eligible to foster. And our plea is, consider fostering. Contact us here at Bernardo's and find out if this is the right time for you to foster.
And just on that point, bringing you back in, Trish and Matt, was there anything, I'm sure there must have been, things that you hadn't considered once you actually had some of the children placed with you, things that surprised you? I mean, what advice would you give to someone thinking about becoming a foster carer?
I would definitely recommend getting in touch with the agency or speaking to a foster carer, try to find out what their experiences is, because that's going to be the raw, honest truth. And it is really rewarding and it's so fulfilling.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is there's so many different kinds of fostering that we weren't aware of. So there are people that kind of do short-term fostering to cover other foster carers while they have a bit of time off. There's short-term placements, long-term placements. And as Brenda was saying, I think diversity is so important. So we've been able to provide kind of children to explore their cultural identities, to explore their sexuality at times, because we've given them that open environment. And I think anybody that is able to do that, definitely find out more.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Trish and Matt, about your experiences, and also to you, Brenda Farrell from Bernardo's. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me just bring you some latest statistics from the Office for National Statistics. The latest data on COVID-19 deaths in the UK up by 18%, says the ONS. So this is the number of deaths registered in the UK in the week ending the 27th of August was 11,666. 769 of those involved COVID-19, 115 more than the previous week. So COVID deaths in the UK up by 18%, according to that latest data. Let me just bring you in a couple more comments from people on the social care story, our key story today. Jack Fielding has been in touch to say, I need lifetime care and know my parents won't be here forever. I don't have much in terms of assets. Social care is something I need to look at. We mustn't forget people like me. I mean, I'm not sure what age Jack is, but he looks quite young. We mustn't forget people like me need decades worth of care. This from John Harry Coleshill, who says the department name is Department of Health and Social Care. All services provided should be free. All staff should be paid and treated equally. Only debate, as with all government raised funds, is how we raise the money. Principle of all to contribute according to ability to pay must apply. Do keep those thoughts on the social care story today coming in to me. You can do that on Twitter at Annita_McVeigh and use the hashtag BBC Your Questions. The time is 9:47. Let's recap the headlines now. The long-awaited plan to pay for the growing cost of social care in England will be set out by the Prime Minister today. Ministers say their COVID booster jab plan will help deal with any increase in cases in the autumn. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will set out her government's programme for the next year at Holyrood this afternoon. Today, El Salvador becomes the first country in the world to formally adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. The US dollar remains in use in this Central American country, but Salvadorians can pay for services or goods with Bitcoin. But many people there have concerns about the move, as they say they're unfamiliar with the cryptocurrency and worried about its volatility. Sergi Focada reports.
Hairdressers, supermarkets or pizza places in El Salvador are now accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. It's been adopted as legal tender in the country alongside the US dollar, and it has its own Bitcoin law, which says that all businesses should be able to take the cryptocurrency. More than 200 new cash machines have been installed across the country to exchange the cryptocurrency for dollars and withdraw cash. The government is offering $30 in free Bitcoin to encourage citizens to use its national wallet, which is called Chivo, a local word for something good or nice. But El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, is having a tough time persuading people that making Bitcoin legal tender is a good idea.
No al Bitcoin!
General enthusiasm is low, with polls suggesting a majority of Salvadorians disagree with the move. Critics of the plan argue that using Bitcoin is risky, given the cryptocurrency's volatility and because it could be used to launder money.
People don't want it. That coin is unstable. There is no price fixing.
Our elderly people find it very difficult to use the technology needed for this virtual coin.
I don't like it. I like going to the shops and using banknotes.
The government sees Bitcoin adoption as a way to facilitate money transfers from Salvadorians living abroad. More than 2 million Salvadorian workers in other countries send money to their families back home, and remittances make up around 20% of the country's economy. Sergi Furcada, BBC News.
The number of female gamers is growing rapidly, with nearly half the world's gamers now women and girls. But few are making it in esports, the competitive side of video games. Research shared exclusively with the BBC has found that there are no female players in the top 300 earners. Joe Tidy has more.
Cloud9 White are dominating all other female professional teams in Valorant.
Oh my God! Team Ace!
But they're fighting hard to break more records and beat the men too.
It can be like a 10 to 14-hour job daily. I think right now our best bet is beating tier 1 teams and showing that we can compete at that caliber. But given more time, I think we can 100% be competing at the high echelon of play.
The team are encouraging all competitive female gamers to challenge the status quo, namely that women can't make it at the sharp end of gaming. Research from esportsearnings.com, shared exclusively with the BBC, found that there are no female players in the top 100 all-time earners, or the top 200. You have to go all the way down to 338th to trans player Scarlet to find a female player. The next female top earner isn't until 680th. It's not like women aren't playing. Research suggests that nearly half of all gamers are now female, with growth in many countries, particularly in Asia. 23-year-old Malaysian Betty Chai is a semi-professional Dota 2 player.
We won! Oh my. I'm earning just a bit, but I've taken like a few projects from like streaming partners. That's how I managed to survive, I guess.
Dota 2 is gearing up for a record $40 million tournament. Once again, there'll be no female finalists this year. Of the $235 million awarded so far in Dota 2, only 0.002% has been won by women. So why aren't women winning? Betty thinks it could be because of the immature culture in gaming, putting female players off.
I love you, I love you. Like most games, it goes two ways. So one is they will say, oh my God, babe, I love you. This kind of weird stuff. Like, they never seen a girl in their life. Sometimes it's like a toxic one. They'll be like, woman, go back to the kitchen. Pretty general trash talk, so.
Some think a solution is to split esports into male and female competitions entirely. But not everyone agrees.
So you're saying that you wouldn't want there to be a division where women can't play against men?
Oh, that'd be horrible. I wouldn't play the game if that was the case, personally.
Tell me why. Can you explain that?
The point of me playing every day is to improve, and I just wouldn't be doing that. What's the point if you're like only playing against like a very small section of the Valorant as a whole?
C9 White says it's up to gaming organisations to start fully backing female players.
If you just get that one team to succeed, it's like similar to when the 4-minute mile got broken, when no one had done it before, and then one person does it, and then following that, it's like dozens more people just the next year are suddenly able to do it.
2021 might not be the year for a major breakthrough. But many are hoping esports will soon see the potential in its huge, untapped female talent pool. Joe Tidy, BBC News.
Shetland Islanders are split over whether a proposed oil field off their coastline should be given approval. But some environmentalists are even more concerned about a new wind farm which is currently being built. Our correspondent James Cook reports.
We are sitting on a wealth of natural resource, and it's about harnessing that.
In 50 years' time, 100 years' time, we'll be looking at the rusted remains of the once glittering wind farm and asking, what the hell were we thinking?
Oil very drastically changed the community in so many ways. Oil has been a real positive for Shetland.
Here on the idyllic edge of the UK, trouble is brewing. Just over this horizon lies the Cambo oil field, 800 million barrels, which climate campaigners say should stay in the ground.
Should we stop drilling in these waters now? That's the question facing Shetland, and in a way it's the question facing all of us. Are we really ready to power the modern world without oil and gas?
There is no point in stopping production of oil and gas where we can control it in the UK to see it being imported from outside the UK. I think it's not feasible to flick the switch overnight in terms of that oil and gas. We can't turn it off overnight and have the renewable energy there, because quite frankly the renewable energy is not there.
It is coming though. This huge new wind farm called Viking will send electricity from Shetland to mainland Scotland for the first time.
Yes, we've massively benefited from oil and gas over the past decades, but we are sitting on a wealth of natural resource, and we really should lead by example here and look for ways to transition to cleaner energy without creating new oil fields or drilling for new oil.
But critics worry about the industrialisation of Shetland.
If you had to choose between Cambo drilling for oil and this wind farm, as an environmentalist, what would you choose?
As an environmentalist, I would still choose Cambo. Viking Energy is not a green answer. Cambo is removing oil, fossil fuel, from the ground. But Viking Energy, in order to get their turbines up, they're displacing the peat, which is a fossil fuel.
Viking Energy say they are restoring far more peatland than they disturb.
The carbon payback of this project, taking all those things into account, will be less than 2 years. We have a vast renewable energy resource in Shetland, and the whole world is moving to carbon net zero. Shetland needs to play its part.
Modern Shetland was built on oil. The proceeds paid for this swimming pool and 7 others. But now these beautiful islands are torn about when and how to give up their grimy golden goose. James Cook, BBC News, Lerwick.
Beautiful landscape and seascape there. It's time now for a look at the weather. Here's Sarah Keith Lucas.